In this video, I am going to talk about the new Jeanne du Barry movie, which is a French historical movie about the last mistress of King Louis XV of France. It was written, directed and produced by Myron, who also stars in the leading role. The movie became perhaps especially famous about the fact that Johnny Depp stars as King Louis, and this marks his big return to cinema after his controversies and his much spoken about divorce and defamation trial with his ex-wife Amber Heard. It premiered in Cannes this year, and the movie and Depp himself got a standing ovation that reportedly lasted for 7 minutes. Myra herself said that she had been planning a Madame du Barry movie ever since she saw Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette in 2006, when she got particularly drawn to the character of du Barry. She wrote the script for Jeanne du Barry with a French actor in mind for the role of King Louis, but later, for several reasons, she decided to cast Johnny Depp for the role, who can speak French, but not on a native level. Now, I think that it was a good idea to make a movie about Madame du Barry. I think she has never been a protagonist in anything before. She has always been in supporting roles, mainly in Marie Antoinette movies. If a mistress of Louis XV gets some spotlight, it is usually Pompadour, but du Barry had a very interesting life too, with lots of ups and downs and everything you could need for an exciting movie. So I think there was a lot of potential in a du Barry movie. Now, I must admit that I already had big problems with this movie even before watching it. And that was because I just couldn't help but dislike certain casting choices. Particularly, I think that Myron cast herself as du Barry out of vanity and not because she was the best choice for the role. She's just very far from what would have been suitable for this role. On one hand, du Barry was 25 when she became the king's mistress, and only 31 when he died. And Myron is well in her mid-40s now, much too old to play this very young woman who was 33 years the king's junior. And it is not just the historical accuracy, her tender age plays an important role in the story as well. And if we speak about how historically inaccurate this casting choice was, Jeanne in history was an incredibly, exceptionally beautiful woman with thin blonde ringlets and doll-like facial features. Her extraordinary beauty and captivating charm enabled her to rise from the lowest to the highest of society through the men she seduced. And I'm sorry if it sounds rude, but to me, Myron is just not convincing in this role, and she didn't even bother to change her hair color for more than one scene. That is literally the easiest thing to do if you care only a little about historical accuracy. Weird as it sounds, it was still Depp who seemed a more accurate casting choice for the role of King Louis. He was at least the correct age, although physically he also doesn't resemble the king that much. But at least the difference is not as striking as in Myron's case. But then you have the problem that the movie was made in French, and Depp, who plays the French king, cannot speak French on a native level. And according to some reports, a lot of scenes of King Louis and a lot of lines that Depp should have said were simply cut out of the movie to deal with this language problem. Indeed, in the end result, he doesn't speak much and his sentences are very short and simple, and for what is said to be a main role, his screen presence is much less than half of the movie. And it is not good for the movie because I think there was a disturbing lack of good dialogue between the two lovers. It seemed obvious that the movie's intention was to make the audience think that Jeanne is very intelligent and smart, and that is part of her appeal, which is good, especially if she lacks other kinds of appeal. But then you have to write scenes and dialogues which makes us see that these characteristics of hers attract the king and it contributes to him falling in love with her. So all in all, I think that for the movie, it would have been better if a good French actor was cast in this role, because there are a lot of them. Nevertheless, I have to admit that yes, I understand Myron's decision that she cast Depp, because Financially, I am pretty sure it was the best decision she could make. The marketing power Depp had right after the trial, his first big role, his big return. I understand that this was a jackpot box office wise, no matter what you think of Depp's controversies. And his acting is not bad at all in the movie, although he doesn't really have a difficult job here. He has very simple scenes and only a few sentences. But I still stand by my opinion that even though it would have made less money, the movie would have been better with a French actor. And then Maïwenn could have used the whole script she wrote back then with the French actor in mind, and there would have been no need to cut out so many scenes and dialogues. Now, when I saw that Maïwenn, who is only 13 years younger than Depp, instead of 33 years, was going to play Du Barry, I thought that, okay, perhaps this was intentional and the goal was to present a great love story in the movie, in which case it is better, especially for the modern audience, to have a couple who are close in age and not an old man and a young girl who could be his daughter. But do we get a great love story in the movie? No, and I think this is the biggest problem with the movie. In my opinion, there is absolutely no chemistry between the main duo. You really can't understand why these two are together. You can't see why he's so into her that he breaks rules for her and he chooses her instead of all the other women who all want to be in her place. Like I said, you can't see what her great appeal is, why he's so drawn to her. And while it is clear that at first she wants to be with him because he's the king, towards the end she goes to really great lengths for him and she shows deep feelings for him, which seems very weird because again they just don't have any chemistry, and what is clearly supposed to be written as a love story is not very well written at all. Honestly, she has much more chemistry with the valet, to the point that I half expected them to make out after the king's death. I know this sounds weird, but yeah, this is exactly how much chemistry she has with the valet in contrast to the king. So I think the story quite lacked a good, properly working love story in the center of it. It is not a bad or poorly written story, it is a quite typical, not like the other girls' rags to riches story about a woman who rose through the social ladder using her sexuality and was constantly despised for it. And it is quite good to see Du Barry's story from her own point of view, because she is usually portrayed as the slut or the wicked rival of Marie Antoinette, and it is nice to see her story through her own lens. I think it was a good decision to start her story at the very beginning with her youth and to show a lot of her life before she met Louis. However, the movie uses so much narration that it is counterproductive sometimes. Like, the most interesting things about her life are simply told in a few sentences by the narrator, instead of having one or two good scenes that would show those events in her life. I know that the movie's screen time is limited, but several meaningless and dull events are shown on screen, and things that would be more interesting are not shown, just told by the narrator. I already talked about what I think of the main characters of the movie, but I would also like to say a few sentences about the others. So the valet, Laborde, just completely stole the show, I think, from everyone. He is the best character in the whole movie, and also the actor who plays him does the best acting job in the whole production, by far. Another good addition was Adolphe, Guillaume du Barry's son, with whom Jeanne has a very interesting mother-like relationship, and it adds important depth to Jeanne's character. I think the intention was similar with Zamor's character to show how maternal Jeanne is with him, but I don't think that turns out so well. The problem is that Zamor is gifted to her as a slave by Louis, and that is never truly addressed in the movie, not in the way it should have been. They are just shown as having fun with each other. Jeanne is taking care of him and educating him, while he still serves her as her page. But when she is asked if he is her slave, she says, "No, he's my page." It is so weird. But there was such a huge potential to make Zamor a very complex, interesting character, which the movie doesn't manage to do. He always seems perfectly happy with Jean, and he's always cute and nice. And then, at the very end of the movie, the narrator says that during the French Revolution, everyone had to choose a side, and Zamor chose the revolution, and he betrayed Jeanne, and she was executed. And this is such a simplified narrative, and it just comes so out of the blue, in contrast to what we see in the movie, with all being wonderfully perfect between them. Really, Zamor is such an underserved character in the movie. If he had been given at least half of the attention Adolphe or Laborde was, he would have made the movie and the main character herself so much more interesting. Then we also have Guillaume du Barry's character, who gets so much screen time in the movie as Jean's lover and pimp and later husband, but he's kinda underserved and badly written too. He usually seems decent to her, well, as much as a pimp can be, but then there is suddenly a scene when he, for no particular reason, physically assaults her very brutally, and then in the next scenes, he goes on to be normal again. He later even marries her. That assault scene is just so random, and it doesn't really have a place in the story. And then we have the royal family's characters too. King Louis's daughters are reduced to cartoonish wicked hags who just hate Jeanne from the start because they do. There is Marie Antoinette, who gets an important role in the second part of the movie as du Barry's main antagonist. Her character is okay in the movie, but could have been written better. Oh, and by the way, look at this actress. This young woman with charming doll-like facial features and blonde ringlets. Yeah, that is exactly how du Barry was described in real life. You had the perfect actress for the role, and you cast yourself instead. Marie Antoinette's counterpart in the movie is her husband, Louis XVI, who is the only royal family member who is always kind to Jeanne, which is an interesting, although not historically accurate, addition to the movie. Speaking of historical accuracy, this may sound surprising, but I think it is handled decently in the movie. It is certainly not a documentary, but it follows Jeanne's life and the main events relatively accurately. The biggest inaccuracy is really the casting and Jeanne's whole appearance. Her hairstyle, her costumes, everything about how she looks in the movie. And not just the looks, the whole character just seems not to be Madame du Barry, but Maïwenn herself. As if she wanted to make a Maïwenn Goes to 18th Century Versailles movie. Otherwise, the costumes are quite good in the movie. The men's outfits, the other women's dresses, many of them are great. The sets and the visuals are quite stunning. Versailles as a set location can be nothing but great. Maïwenn also said that she used the movie Barry Lyndon as a template for how the movie should look, and I think that was a great choice. All in all, I have to say that my opinion is probably influenced by the fact that I very much liked the recent Marie Antoinette miniseries, and two things I loved about it were Gaia Weiss as Madame du Barry and James Purefoy as Louis XV. They were both so great in those roles, especially Gaia, who literally became du Barry for me, that I just can't help but think how much better her du Barry was than Maïwenn's. And the same for Johnny Depp's King Louis. By the way, I think the French actor Vincent Perez would have been perfect for the king's role in this du Barry movie. He already played Louis XV before in a Madame de Pompadour miniseries, and he's now the perfect age for a du Barry movie. But Maïwenn obviously thought otherwise. What do you think of the movie? Do you agree or disagree with me? Let me know in the comments.